Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dream Team web series. Today's segment is Fear of Social Rejection. I have Michael S. Seaver here, and I'm excited to have him on the series and interview him today. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Natasha, thank you for having me.
So Michael is an executive coach with expertise in executive leadership, personal branding, change management. I think the list can go on. He's just amazing. So I'm just excited to have him here. So Michael, why don't you just talk a little bit more about your background and share something interesting about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Natasha. Yeah, so I am an executive coach who serves executives that are in corporations and also high net worth individuals or entrepreneurs. Do a lot of leadership consulting in the areas that you just referenced. Serve on the board of directors for Big Brothers Big Sisters. Have a podcast of my own called Equal Chance to Be an Equal. Do a lot that I can in the community to find ways to mentor, to coach, to develop others. I'm a really, really big fan of hiking. So any chance I have an opportunity to get out and go hiking, I'd love to.
Me too. There's like such great just hiking in LA. So I can just imagine where you are.
Oh my gosh, in Phoenix, the mountains are fantastic.
That's amazing. Amazing views, everything.
Yep.
So let's just dive into this. Let's talk about overcoming fear. What are the 4 buckets of things that you would label as human fears?
Sure. And thank you for asking. So I'm certified to deliver something called the DISC assessment. And it's a communication behavioral preference profile that's been around since the late 1930s. And so basically through millions and millions of hours of work, neuroscience work, lots of different types of research and case studies, what it's come down to is that there's 4 basic buckets of fear. One is that we fear being vulnerable. The second, which is kind of the focus of our conversation today, is the fear of social rejection. The third is the loss of long-term security. And the fourth is basically criticism of our work product. And so each of those 4 kind of buckets of fear can manifest in a lot of different ways. But it's just important to recognize that some behavior that we have or some fear that we have is going to be connected back to one of those buckets.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting. So what is the process of overcoming a particular fear, regardless of which one it is?
Sure. Yeah, because there are so many different ways that those fears can manifest in our lives. I'm just a big fan of looking at this through a couple of different steps. Number 1 is that we have to be emotionally intelligent enough to recognize that we actually have the fear, right? Openly acknowledge it to ourselves or maybe even to a confidant, loved one, or somebody close to us. Once we've done that and we start to think about a plan to move forward in our lives, I really want us to think about how negative events or challenges that we have gone through in the past still shape our memories and still shape us and who we are today. So I really want people to accept or move on from or forgive or forget some of those negative memories that they have and can figure out a way to feel balanced with and say, okay, that was just a learning from some point in our past. So once they do that, today I really try to encourage them as much as possible to practice positive psychology. And that can happen in a lot of different ways, but I'm just a big fan of daily journaling or a random act of kindness, buying somebody a gift. Maybe it's sending a thank you card to them. There's lots of different things it can be. So once we've started a little bit of positive psychology, then I want to make sure that they're spending time actually confronting the fear directly. So they have to expose themselves to it somehow, but making sure that they're walking into it with a learning mindset, knowing that it's okay to make a mistake when they're actually going to try to confront the fear. So once they've done that and they've had a couple of experiences of confronting the fear again, I'm a really big fan of learning from reflection. So if they can use a journal or talk to somebody or do something where they have a look at when they actually confronted the fear, was it really that bad actually going through it, right? Was it really as bad as they made it out to be? And then that when they walk into potentially do that same thing again, they feel a bigger sense of safety, security, or confidence through it.
Amazing. I wanted to go back to identifying what your fear is.
Sure.
I think for a lot of people, they don't understand their fear. They don't understand whatever is happening to them is actually fear.
Sure.
So how do you go as an individual, especially in being an entrepreneur, how can you go above yourself and your mindset and figure out what actually is a fear, how to label it? It's not always so obvious.
Yeah, that's true. So for some folks who are struggling with being undecided about whether or not it's some other type of emotion or if it's actually a fear, I will ask some of my clients to keep what I call is a pain journal. And what I mean by that is that any single time that they're feeling sad or angry or upset, or they're just having an extra emotional response to something, that what I ask them to do is just write it down either in their phone, or maybe it's a small journal that they can handwrite notes in. But what was the situation that was occurring during that moment that you felt sadness or fear or anger or something, some negative emotion? And so once we've written that down, maybe we keep track of ourselves for 7, 10, or 14 days. Undoubtedly, we can go back and look at it and say, oh my gosh, I continued to be confronted by this fear when I talked to my parents, or when I was public speaking, or when I went to class, or when I was asking for money when I was trying to get some seed funding or something. And so once we start to address and understand where the pattern of those feelings are coming from, then we can look into the person's past and say, okay, this is probably what is triggering this emotion from some time before.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I don't know if I would call it the pain journal. That would scare me. Like, I would just think of it negatively, but
Sure.
I love the idea of keeping a journal and like labeling it. And maybe you do label it fear or pain or whatever emotion you're feeling. I think
Sure.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
How valuable is an accountability partner in the process?
Sure. I'm just, I'm reading a book right now. It's called Social, and I'm looking at it on my desk, written by a guy named Matthew Lieberman. And it's about how all human brains are actually hardwired to be connected to other humans. We actually have a very, very distinct desire to be with other people, or to, if you remember Brene Brown's work around her book, Daring Greatly, we all really, really don't want to be shamed. And the best way to do that is to be accepted via some other person. And so if you have an accountability partner, whether it's a loved one, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a mentor or a coach, somebody in your community that you just deem to be an accountability partner, those persons are so critical because they can do things that we can't do for ourselves, right? They can ask objective questions. They allow for us to vent when we're really struggling with something specific. If we're going to events in person or we fear social rejection, what if that person goes with us actually to an event? If we tell them we're going to do something, all of a sudden he or she is going to hold us accountable to make sure that we actually do that thing. And then as we're going through it, undoubtedly, we're going to have some wins. We're going to have some success. And then now we have a person to celebrate those wins and successes with. So what could be better than that?
Yes. And I think I think as individuals, we also feel good when we share. It's like a release.
Yeah.
And it's good to just have a support, because it's reliable. It makes you feel good. It makes you motivated. And so that's amazing. I think that's great. So why do you think people fear failure and or success? Because I think people, like for me, I know when I started becoming an entrepreneur, I had a fear of success, and I didn't realize that I had that fear until like I actually started looking at things and like why I would make up excuses on like how to like scale, like just introducing new things. It would just, freak me out. And it helped me to see, as I started like looking at my cycle behavior, that I was actually fearful of success, which is like the idiotic thing when you say to people. They're like, how can you fear success? I'm like, because it's scary.
Yep. Yeah, and it really, really is. And so it's different when you're successful inside of a job or a corporation or some sort of full-time job that you don't really like, because your heart is oftentimes not connected to that success. But when you become an entrepreneur, the game changes, because you're basically putting your heart out for everybody to see, right? You're doing something that you're really interested in, you're very, very passionate about, and it's very, very hard to receive criticism for something that we love so deeply. So there's this hard part about becoming an entrepreneur, because first and foremost, people really don't like change, right? We don't necessarily mind it too much, but it's really hard for us if it's something that's bestowed upon us or told us that we have to do, and we don't really have a say in actually going through or doing the change. So the human brain, right, to your point earlier, Natasha, is there's a small little part of it called the amygdala, which is kind of like the fight or flight response. So anytime we're doing something scary, we always think about, do I have to fight it or do I have to run away from it? And so when we're doing things that are really significant matters of the heart, we trigger the amygdala to work, or we go into that fight or flight response really, really quickly. And then the other thing I think about, especially when we're becoming entrepreneurs, is a guy named Robert Cialdini wrote a book back in the 1980s called Influence. And humans have this very, very distinct need to want to be perceived as consistent. So if we are constantly changing our mind or constantly moving from one thing to the next, then we look like we're irrational, and people are not going to like us as a result of that. And so becoming an entrepreneur is typically a very, very big change, right? It tugs on our heartstrings, and we have to put our heart out there for other people to see, which is hard. And it's just one of those things, like, there's so much change. Are people going to perceive us as being okay? So I'm a huge fan of entrepreneurship, right? I built my entire business around helping other people become the most authentic versions of themselves. I think it's a fantastic tool for learning and self-development. So for your audience, anybody that's listening, entrepreneurship is a tremendous, tremendous path to achieving many tremendous goals for yourself.
Amazing. I'm trust me, I am a firm believer becoming an entrepreneur is why we started this masterclass, just to have people have an understanding that not every idea that you have is gonna succeed, but the whole purpose is to keep going, having that commitment and consistency, and eventually you'll get to that place. And there's no shame in failure, because behind every success, there's a bunch of failures. And failures is meant to be learned and not, be ashamed of, or not a topic of discussion. It's something you went through. And I think it's a lot of power behind that. And so I'm a firm believer, just whatever idea you have, just go with the flow, see where it goes, and, just keep trying and buckle on. How can people build resilience through the change? Because it's hard. It's hard. Yeah,
it is. And you're experiencing it. I've definitely experienced it. I technically started my business, Seaver Consulting, the coaching that I do, in 2011. I wasn't able to start doing it until about 2013, 2014, just because I had a full-time job until I could make enough money. And so it was really, really interesting to think about, how do we overcome change, or how do we become resilient, or how do we build up a confidence through it? And the way that I've kind of come to this agreement for myself, or for some of the other people that I coach, is that I always want them to set their own personal mission statement. And so organizations that we work with, not for profit or for profit, they always have a mission statement. And I just think that every single person on the planet should have one too. And so if we define what our own mission statement is, we can build up a really, really defined level of confidence. But what we can also do is know what to say yes to and what to say no to, right? And that's probably the hard part sometimes, is what do we say yes or no to? Exactly. So, right? So the mission statement helps us to know what to say yes to. So as you're thinking about resilience and change, also think about that it's okay that you're going to hit rock bottom a couple of times, because that's oftentimes where the best learnings happen. And if you can position it in your mind as though it is purely just a learning situation opportunity, and that it's a short-term thing, right? It's not permanent. It's not going to last forever. It's hard not to feel that. When you're in it, you're like, no, it's never good. Right? But the other thing through that is that, yeah, it's not permanent, but it's also not what's called pervasive. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't affect all areas of your life at the same time. So even if you lose a client, or some piece of funding doesn't come through the way that you hoped it wouldn't, right? You still get to eat. You still get to go to the gym. You still have your same friends. 90% of your life remains the same. And I think that people think that it's going to affect all these areas of their lives, and it's just not going to. So if you want to build some resilience, just remember that it's not permanent, it's not pervasive, and that it really, really is value add if you can figure out a way to share any of your learnings, the ups and the downs, hitting the rock bottom. If you can share them with other people, like being a mentor or coach somewhere, it is going to build resilience through the roof for you. Yeah, and I think also the more you give in that way, where you're just sharing and you're just being super generous, it always comes back to you tenfold. So I'm a true believer in just sharing and just being really giving with any information that you have, because it's just a beautiful thing. And the worst thing that can happen is pretty much nothing. You're not losing from sharing and just being generous and contributing, because everyone should be contributing to society one point or another. I agree wholeheartedly, Natasha. I agree.
So what number one advice would you give to every entrepreneur building a business to execute their vision?
Sure. Um, you touched on it just about 2 minutes ago, and I think it's a really important point. I'm a very, very big proponent of not simply setting goals, but making sure that your daily habits and rituals align with those goals.
Mm-hmm.
So every single person is going to create different goals for this month or for this year or for a 3-year period. But what really matters more than anything else is whether or not they're going to commit the 30, the 60, the 120, the 3 hours, whatever it is, every single day to make sure that those goals happen. And I think if people can think about that way and just say that, yes, I'm going to block off this time period every single day for development of some piece of my business, it is going to be so simple for them to make the goals happen. So daily habits and rituals are definitely the answer for me.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I have like a planner that has my days always listed out. I have it in writing. I'll put it in my Google Calendar. It's just so, it makes you way more aligned with your goals, and you can actually see yourself taking those steps little by little towards the main goal, which is the only way to actually achieve it. Is just
Agreed.
take those little steps up into that ladder up to the top.
Yep. That's so true. That's such a great metaphor.
Okay, so today Michael has been so generous to offer a 1-hour personal branding consultation. So do you want to speak more on that?
Sure, and thank you for saying that. So most of my work came down to a process that I developed in 2013. I call it my Incorporate You process. I just think that every person has the capacity to be the CEO of his or her own brand. So in the 1 hour, anybody that we can gift this to, what we're really looking to do is I'm going to ask them a series of questions. And through that series of questions, I'm going to be able to help them draft a personal mission statement, likely tease out a few of their goals, whatever those might be, and then really think about what are the 5, 6, 7 things that make them different and unique in the marketplace. And so my hope is that through that 1 hour of time, I can ask the questions, figure out what the mission statement is, or what's that value proposition statement that really makes that person different or unique. And then just brainstorm with that person about, hey, these are the ways that maybe you would want to try to implement some of these things in your life. So I'm very, very thankful that you asked and that I'm able to offer that, because I think it could really change a person's perspective or some of the things that they're working on.
Oh, tenfold, I tell you. I'm completely into the whole coaching. I think it's always good to gain clarity on what your vision is, exactly in the right direction of where you want your life to be. It's always hard to figure out how to get there, and I feel like that sometimes that it becomes a barrier, because then people do not want to try entrepreneurship or do the thing that they always have been passionate about. So gaining clarity on where you see your life and what happiness is and how you can get there is just so valuable to being successful in business, but also in life, because they both intertwine. They're not separate.
In so many ways. Yep.
Thank you so much, Michael, for being here. And I wanted to thank everyone out there for being part of this masterclass. You are the only one who could create your vision to be successful. So why not start and do that today? Have a great day. And thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Thank you.